The rain came down in sheets that Tuesday morning, turning the parking lot of the fast food restaurant into a mirror of gray sky. Ethan Wilson pulled his old truck into a spot near the entrance, wipers still fighting against the downpour. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed over empty tables. He ordered 2 breakfast sandwiches, one for himself and one for his 6-year-old daughter, still asleep at home. While waiting, he noticed her. A woman sat hunched in the corner booth, soaking wet, trembling. Her coat hung heavy with rain, her face pale and hollow. She stared at the menu board but made no move to order. Ethan watched her arms wrap around her stomach, her eyes closing as if fighting pain. He looked down at the bag in his hands, then back at her. Without thinking, he walked over and set his own sandwich in front of her. "Here, you need this more than I do. It's cold out there." She looked up, eyes red and swollen mouth, opening to speak. But before any words came, the door burst open. 3 lawyers in dark suits rushed in, water dripping from their briefcases. "Ms. Hart, we've been searching for you for 2 weeks." Ethan stepped back, confused. The woman froze her hand, hovering over the sandwich he'd given her. The lead lawyer, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair, moved closer. "Ms. Hart, please. We need to get you somewhere safe. The board is in crisis. The company is falling apart." The woman, Ms. Hart, looked between Ethan and the lawyers, her breathing rapid and shallow. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't go back there. Not after what they did." The male lawyer, younger with wire-rimmed glasses, glanced at Ethan with suspicion. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step away. This is a private matter." But Ms. Hart reached out and grabbed the edge of Ethan's jacket. "He helped me. He's the only person who's been kind to me in weeks." Her voice cracked. Ethan looked down at her, really seeing her now. Beneath the dirt and exhaustion, he saw terror. Not just hunger or cold, but deep bone-level fear. The third lawyer, an older man with a gravelly voice, softened his tone. "Ms. Hart, Valerie, your father. We found evidence. It wasn't natural causes." Valerie's hand tightened on Ethan's jacket. She began to shake, not from cold, but from something far worse. The older lawyer continued, "Someone poisoned him, and we believe whoever did it is still inside the company." Ethan felt his stomach drop. This wasn't just a woman down on her luck. This was something far more dangerous. Valerie looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have involved you, but I didn't know where else to go." The lawyers moved in closer, ready to escort her out. One of them opened an umbrella. Ethan watched as they led her toward the door, her hand slipping from his jacket. She turned back, once her eyes meeting his. In that moment, he saw gratitude mixed with desperation. A silent plea. Then she was gone, disappearing into the rain. Ethan stood in the middle of the fast food restaurant, the remaining sandwich growing cold in the bag. The cashier stared at him. "You know that lady?" Ethan shook his head. "No, I just thought she looked hungry." He walked back to his truck, but couldn't shake the image of her face. When he got home, Lily was awake, sitting at the kitchen table with her coloring book spread out. "Daddy, you took forever." He smiled and ruffled her blonde curls. "Sorry, sweetheart. Had to make it a stop." He divided his sandwich in half and gave her the bigger piece. She didn't notice. She never did. That's what he loved about her. Simple joys, simple needs. Not like the world that woman, Valerie, clearly came from. Ethan Wilson had learned long ago that life could strip you bare. 8 years earlier, he'd been a rising star in New York finance, the kind of guy who wore $1,500 suits and closed deals worth millions. Then Lily was born. His wife, Rebecca, had smiled for the cameras, played the part of the doting mother. But when Lily turned 1, Rebecca left a note on the kitchen counter. "I can't do this. I'm not built for motherhood. Don't look for me." She'd vanished, filed for divorce through a lawyer Ethan never met and never called again. Ethan had stood in their Manhattan penthouse holding a crying baby and realized he had a choice. Career or daughter, Wall Street or something real. He chose Lily. He sold everything, paid off Rebecca's half in the settlement, and moved to a small town in Pennsylvania where the cost of living was low and life moved slower. He opened a small auto repair shop, worked with his hands, and raised his daughter alone. People in town knew him as the quiet mechanic who always had time to fix a neighbor's car for cheap. They didn't know about his MBA from Wharton or the 6-figure salary he'd walked away from. He didn't talk about it. It didn't matter anymore. What mattered was Lily's laugh when he pushed her on the swings. What mattered was tucking her in at night and reading her stories about princesses and dragons. What mattered was being present, being there, being the parent she deserved. The rain continued through the morning. Ethan worked in his garage replacing brake pads on a Honda Civic, but his mind kept drifting back to the woman in the restaurant, Valerie Hart. The lawyer said her father had been poisoned, that she'd been missing for 2 weeks, that the company was in crisis. He wiped his hands on a rag and pulled out his phone. A quick search brought up dozens of articles. Tech billionaire Richard Hart dies at 63. Hart Industries shares plummet after CEO's sudden death. Valerie Hart missing following father's funeral. Ethan scrolled through the photos. There she was in designer clothes standing beside her father at some gala. Confident, poised, nothing like the broken woman he'd met this morning. He read further. Richard Hart had built a tech empire from nothing, pioneering cloud security software that major corporations relied on. Valerie had been groomed to take over, earning her stripes as chief operating officer before her father's death. But when Richard died, supposedly from a sudden heart attack, the board moved quickly to install an interim CEO. Valerie had attended the funeral, then vanished. No one knew where she'd gone. The media speculated everything from a nervous breakdown to foul play. Ethan set his phone down. 2 weeks living on the streets, running from something or someone, and she'd ended up in his town in that restaurant looking like she hadn't eaten in days. He thought about her hand gripping his jacket, the way her eyes had begged him to understand something she couldn't say out loud. "Daddy," Lily's voice pulled him from his thoughts. She stood in the doorway of the garage holding her stuffed rabbit. "Can we have mac and cheese for lunch?" He smiled. "Absolutely. Let me just wash up." As he scrubbed the grease from his hands, he tried to push Valerie Hart from his mind. Whatever was happening in her world, it wasn't his problem. He had his own life, his own responsibilities. But that night, as he put Lily to bed, she asked him a question that stuck. "Daddy, why do people hurt each other?" He paused, smoothing her blanket. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "At school, Tommy pushed Sarah and made her cry. Why did he do that?" Ethan sat on the edge of her bed. Sometimes people are scared or angry and they don't know how to handle it, so they hurt others instead of asking for help. Lily frowned. "That's sad." "It is," Ethan agreed. "That's why we always try to be kind, because we don't know what someone else is going through." She nodded, hugging her rabbit tighter. "Like when you gave that lady your sandwich." He blinked. "You saw that." "I saw her through the window when you came out. She looked really sim." Ethan kissed her forehead. "Yeah, she did. Did your sandwich make her feel better?" "I hope so, Lily. I really hope so." She closed her eyes, already drifting off. Ethan turned off the light and walked to the living room. He poured himself a glass of water and stood by the window watching the rain. Somewhere out there, Valerie Hart was probably back in her world of boardrooms and lawyers. He'd been a brief, strange footnote in whatever crisis she was navigating. By morning, she'd forget all about the mechanic who gave her a sandwich. But Ethan was wrong, because 3 hours later, there was a knock at his door. He checked the peephole. Valerie Hart stood on his porch, soaked to the bone, shivering. Her hair plastered to her face, her coat still dripping. He opened the door. "Ms. Hart." She looked up at him, and he saw the same terror from that morning, but now mixed with exhaustion so deep it seemed to radiate from her. "I'm sorry, I didn't know where else to go. I can't go back to the company. I can't go to my apartment. They're watching everything. And Her voice broke. "I just needed to find someone who didn't want something from me." Ethan glanced back toward Lily's room, then at Valerie. Every rational part of his brain screamed at him to send her away, to call the lawyers, to not get involved. But he thought about what he told Lily, about being kind, about not knowing what someone else was going through. He stepped aside. "Come in. Let me get you a towel." She hesitated as if she couldn't believe he'd actually let her in, then stepped over the threshold. Water pooled at her feet. Ethan grabbed towels from the bathroom and handed them to her. "The couch is yours for tonight. We'll figure out the rest in the morning." Valerie wrapped the towel around herself, her teeth chattering. "Thank you. I promise I'll leave as soon as I can. I just need one night to think." Ethan nodded. "There's a blanket in the closet. I'll make some tea." As he filled the kettle, he heard her settle onto the couch. By the time the water boiled, she was already asleep, the towel still clutched in her hands. He draped the blanket over her and sat in the armchair across the room watching her. She mumbled in her sleep, her face twisting with nightmares. "They killed him. They're going to kill me too." Ethan leaned forward, his chest tightening. Whatever Valerie Hart had stumbled into, it was far worse than he'd imagined. While Valerie slept fitfully on Ethan's couch 300 miles away in Manhattan, Hart Industries was imploding. The boardroom on the 42nd floor overlooked the city skyline, but none of the 12 members seated around the table paid attention to the view. Gregory Shaw, the interim CEO and former vice president of operations, stood at the head of the table, his expression grim. Valerie Hart has been found. She's alive. Murmurs rippled through the room. Margaret Yao, the chief financial officer, leaned forward. Where is she? Is she coming back? Gregory's jaw tightened. That's unclear. Her legal team located her, but she refused to return. Given her mental state and the circumstances surrounding Richard's death, the board needs to make a decision. An older board member, Thomas Brennan, slammed his hand on the table. Mental state, the woman just lost her father under suspicious circumstances. Of course she's not thinking clearly. That's precisely the point, Gregory said smoothly. Hart Industries cannot afford leadership that's compromised. Our stock has dropped 32% in 2 weeks. Major clients are threatening to pull contracts. We need stability, and Valerie cannot provide that right now. Margaret frowned. Richard's will explicitly named Valerie as his successor. We can't just remove her. Gregory slid a document across the table. This is a temporary removal clause citing incapacitation due to mental health concerns. It's legal and it's necessary. If Valerie wants to contest it, she can do so once she's stable. But right now, we need someone at the helm. The board members exchanged glances. Some looked uncomfortable. Others nodded in agreement. Thomas stood. I won't vote for this. Richard built this company for his daughter. Pushing her out 2 weeks after his death is not only cruel, it's suspicious. Gregory's expression didn't change. Suspicious how? The autopsy found traces of arsenic in Richard's system, Thomas said. The police are investigating it as a homicide, and now you want to remove his daughter from power. How does that look? Gregory's eyes hardened. It looks like a board doing its fiduciary duty. Unless you have evidence to suggest otherwise, I suggest you sit down. The tension in the room was suffocating. Margaret finally spoke. I'll abstain from voting until we hear from Valerie directly. She deserves that much. Others murmured agreement. Gregory's smile was thin. Fine. We'll reconvene in 48 hours. But mark my words, every day Valerie remains absent is another day this company bleeds money and credibility. The meeting adjourned, but as the board members filed out, Thomas pulled Margaret aside. Something isn't right. Gregory has been positioning himself for this since Richard got sick. Margaret nodded. I know. But without proof, there's nothing we can do. Then we find proof, Thomas said, before it's too late. Back in Pennsylvania, dawn broke over Ethan's small house. He woke to find Lily already up standing beside the couch, staring at Valerie. Daddy, who is she? Ethan walked over gently, guiding Lily toward the kitchen. She's someone who needed help. Her name is Valerie. Is she staying with us? Just for a little while. Lily tilted her head, considering this. Okay. Can I give her my extra pillow? That couch isn't very comfy. Ethan smiled. That's very sweet, Lily. Yes, you can. Lily ran to her room and returned with a small pillow decorated with stars. She carefully placed it near Valerie's head. Valerie stirred her eyes, opening slowly. When she saw Lily, she froze. Hi, Lily said brightly. I'm Lily. You look cold, so I brought you a pillow. Valerie's eyes filled with tears. She sat up slowly, taking the pillow. Thank you, Lily. That's very kind. Lily beamed. Daddy says we should always be kind because we don't know what people are going through. Valerie's gaze shifted to Ethan, who stood in the doorway. She nodded, unable to speak. Ethan cleared his throat. Lily, why don't you get dressed for school? I'll make breakfast. Lily skipped off, leaving Ethan and Valerie alone. Valerie wiped her eyes. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have come here. I've put you and your daughter in danger. Are you in danger? Ethan asked directly. She hesitated, then nodded. I think so. My father was murdered. I don't know who did it, but I know it was someone close to him, someone in the company, and if they killed him, they won't hesitate to come after me. Ethan sat down in the armchair. Why did you run? Because I was terrified, she admitted. At the funeral, I saw the way certain people looked at me, like I was an obstacle, and then the lawyer started talking about interim leadership and mental health evaluations. I realized they were going to push me out, so I left. I just started walking and didn't stop. For 2 weeks. I stayed in shelters, cheap motels when I had cash. I didn't use my cards because I knew they'd track me. I just needed time to think, to breathe. but I couldn't think. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my father's face, and I kept wondering who I could trust. Ethan leaned forward. What about your lawyers? The ones who found you yesterday? Valerie shook her head. They're loyal to the company, not to me. They want me back because my absence is hurting the stock price. But the moment I return, I'll be forced into meetings, evaluations, decisions I'm not ready to make. So what's your plan? Ethan asked. I don't have one, she said quietly. That's why I came here. You're the only person who helped me without wanting anything in return. I thought maybe if I could just stay here for a day or two, I could figure out my next move. Ethan studied her. She was clearly intelligent, clearly capable, but also clearly broken. He thought about Lily's question. Why do people hurt each other because they're scared? Because they don't know how to ask for help. You can stay, he said finally, but only if you're honest with me. No more secrets. If I'm going to help you, I need to know what I'm dealing with. Valerie nodded. Okay, I'll tell you everything. Over the next 3 days, Valerie told Ethan everything. About her father's sudden illness, the rapid decline, the death that doctors initially ruled as heart failure. About the autopsy her lawyers had pushed for which revealed arsenic poisoning. About the board meeting where Gregory Shaw had presented himself as a logical choice for interim CEO. About the whispers that Valerie was too emotional, too young, too inexperienced to lead. Gregory's been with the company for 15 years, Valerie explained. He's competent, ambitious, and well-liked. But my father never trusted him. He once told me that Gregory was the kind of man who smiled while sharpening a knife. Ethan listened, piecing together the picture. Do you think Gregory killed your father? I don't know, Valerie said, but I know he benefits the most from my father's death and from me being gone. Ethan pulled up financial records that were publicly available, studying them late into the night after Lily went to bed. Valerie sat beside him, pointing out discrepancies she'd noticed but never had time to investigate. Here, she said, tapping the screen. 3 months before my father died, there was a transfer of company funds to an offshore account. $5 million. It was buried in a routine acquisition report. Ethan frowned. Who authorized it? It would have required 2 signatures, my father's and one other executive. She pulled up the document. Gregory Shaw's name was right there beside Richard Hart's. Ethan leaned back. That's not proof of murder, but it's definitely suspicious. There's more, Valerie said. She pulled out a flash drive she'd been carrying. I copied these files before I left. They're emails between Gregory and someone outside the company. They're coded, but look at the dates. Ethan scanned the emails. They started 6 months before Richard's death and ended 2 days after. The language was vague references to the transition and removing obstacles. We need to take this to the police, Ethan said. Valerie shook her head. The police will take weeks to investigate. By then, Gregory will have consolidated power. The board will vote me out and he'll erase any evidence. Then what do you suggest? I need to go back, Valerie said, but not as the broken woman they saw at the funeral. I need to be strong, clear-headed, and ready to fight. Ethan looked at her. In the 3 days she'd been there, he'd seen her transformation. She'd eaten regular meals, slept without nightmares, and even laughed when Lily tried to teach her how to play a card game. But was she ready to face the people who might have killed her father? You can't do this alone, Ethan said. Valerie met his eyes. I know. That's why I'm asking for your help. I'm a mechanic, Ethan said. What can I possibly do against corporate executives and lawyers? Valerie smiled for the first time since arriving. You're more than a mechanic. I looked you up. Ethan Wilson Wharton, MBA, former senior analyst at Carlson Financial Group. You left New York 8 years ago and no one knows why. But I do. You left to raise your daughter alone. Ethan's jaw tightened. That's none of your business. You're right, Valerie said softly, but it tells me everything I need to know about you. You're brilliant and you have integrity. That's rare, and that's what I need. Ethan stood walking to the window. Lily was playing in the yard, chasing fireflies in the fading light. He'd built a life here, a simple, safe life. Getting involved in Valerie's world meant risking all of that. But he also thought about the woman who'd sat in that restaurant, starving and terrified. The woman who'd knocked on his door because she had nowhere else to go. If I help you, Ethan said slowly, we do this smart, no reckless moves. We gather evidence, we build a case, and we bring in people we can trust. Valerie stood beside him. Agreed. And Lily stays out of it, he added firmly. She doesn't get dragged into this. Of course, Valerie said. Ethan turned to her. Then let's do it. Let's take your company back. The next day, Valerie made a call to Margaret Yao, the one board member she still trusted. They met at a diner 2 towns over, far from prying eyes. Margaret arrived looking exhausted. Valerie, thank God you're safe. They embraced and Valerie felt the weight of her isolation lift slightly. Margaret slid into the booth across from her. The board is voting tomorrow on your removal. Gregory's pushing hard and he has the votes. I know, Valerie said. That's why I need your help. She showed Margaret the emails and the financial records Ethan had helped her compile. Margaret's eyes widened. This is serious. If Gregory's been embezzling funds and orchestrating your father's death, we don't have hard proof of the murder yet, Valerie interrupted. But we have enough to raise questions, enough to delay the vote and call for an independent audit. Margaret nodded slowly. I can push for that. Thomas Brennan will back me, but Gregory won't go down without a fight. I know, Valerie said. That's why I'm coming to the meeting tomorrow, in person. Margaret's concern was immediate. Valerie, are you sure if Gregory is behind your father's death, confronting him could be dangerous? I've spent 2 weeks running, Valerie said. I'm done hiding. Margaret reached across the table, squeezing her hand. Then I'll stand with you. That night, Ethan helped Valerie prepare. They went over every document, every email, every financial discrepancy. He coached her on how to present the information clearly and confidently, how to anticipate Gregory's rebuttals. He'll try to discredit you, Ethan said. He'll say you're emotional, that you're making wild accusations because you're grieving. Then I stay calm, Valerie said. I stick to the facts. Exactly. Lily Yish wandered into the room, rubbing her eyes. Why are you guys still awake? Ethan smiled. Just helping Valerie with some work stuff? Go back to bed, sweetheart. But Lily walked over to Valerie instead. Are you scared? Valerie blinked, surprised by the question. A little. Why? Because when I'm scared, my daddy always tells me to be brave. And being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing even when you are. Valerie's eyes welled up. She knelt down to Lily's level. Your daddy is a very wise man. Lily grinned. I know. She hugged Valerie, then skipped back to her room. Ethan watched the exchange, his chest tightening with an emotion he hadn't felt in years. The next morning, Valerie dressed in one of the suits she'd had Margaret bring. She looked every inch the executive she'd been before her world fell apart. Ethan drove her to the train station. Before she got out, he turned to her. You've got this. Remember, stay calm, stick to the facts, and don't let them rattle you. Valerie nodded. Thank you, Ethan, for everything. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. Just come back safe, he said. She smiled, then stepped out of the truck. Ethan watched her walk into the station, disappearing into the crowd. He sat there for a long moment, then drove back home, praying he'd made the right call. The boardroom was silent when Valerie walked in. 12 faces turned toward her, expressions ranging from shock to relief to barely concealed anger. Gregory Shaw stood at the head of the table, his confident smile faltering for just a moment. Valerie, what a surprise. We were just about to begin the vote on your temporary removal. Valerie set her briefcase on the table and met his eyes. Then it's a good thing I'm here to save you the trouble. She turned to the rest of the board. I apologize for my absence. The past 2 weeks have been the most difficult of my life, but I'm here now and I'm ready to lead this company the way my father intended. Gregory's smile returned, though it didn't reach his eyes. Valerie, no one doubts your dedication. But given the circumstances, the board feels it's in the company's best interest to have stable leadership while you take time to heal. I appreciate the concern, Valerie said evenly. But before any vote is taken, I'd like to present some information the board should be aware of. She opened her briefcase and distributed copies of the financial records and emails. 3 months before my father's death, $5 million were transferred from company funds to an offshore account. This transfer required 2 executive signatures, my father's and Gregory Shaw's. The room erupted. Gregory's face flushed. That transfer was part of a legitimate acquisition. It's all documented. Then you won't mind an independent audit, Valerie said calmly, because these emails suggest otherwise. She read excerpts aloud, her voice steady, references to removing obstacles, to transitions, to ensuring the future of the company. Gregory laughed, though it sounded forced. Those emails are about business strategy, nothing more. Valerie, I understand you're grieving, but making wild accusations won't bring your father back. You're right, Valerie said, but an investigation might bring his killer to justice. The board members stared at her. Margaret spoke up. Valerie, are you saying you believe Gregory was involved in your father's death? I'm saying the evidence warrants investigation, Valerie replied. And until that investigation is complete, I move to suspend Gregory Shaw from his position as interim CEO. Chaos erupted. Gregory slammed his hand on the table. This is absurd. You disappear for 2 weeks, come back with the conspiracy theories, and expect us to take you seriously. Thomas Brennan stood. I second Valerie's motion. An independent audit and investigation should be conducted before any votes on leadership are taken. Margaret nodded. I third it. Gregory looked around the table, realizing he was losing control. Fine, let's vote, all in favor of an investigation. 8 hands went up. Gregory's allies looked uncomfortable, but even they couldn't vote against transparency. Motion passes, Thomas said. Gregory's expression was cold. This is a mistake, Valerie. You're tearing this company apart based on grief and paranoia. No, Valerie said quietly. I'm protecting it, the way my father would have wanted. The meeting adjourned, but as the board members filed out, Gregory approached Valerie. You think you've won, but all you've done is delay the inevitable. This company needs real leadership, not someone playing detective. Valerie met his gaze without flinching. Then you have nothing to worry about. If you're innocent, the investigation will prove it. Gregory leaned in closer, his voice dropping. Your father trusted the wrong people. Don't make the same mistake. He walked out, leaving Valerie standing alone in the boardroom. Her hands were shaking, but she forced herself to breathe. She'd done it. She'd stood up to him. Margaret returned, closing the door behind her. That took guts. I had good coaching, Valerie said, thinking of Ethan. Margaret smiled. The independent auditors will start tomorrow. In the meantime, the board agreed you should resume your role as COO, with the CEO position remaining interim until everything is resolved. Valerie nodded. That's fair. There's one more thing, Margaret said carefully. The police want to speak with you about your father's death and your disappearance. Valerie's stomach dropped. Tomorrow morning, they're treating it as a potential homicide. Valerie sat down heavily. It was all happening so fast. Margaret placed a hand on her shoulder. You're not alone in this, Valerie. A lot of people here loved your father and how believe in you. Thank you, Valerie whispered. That night, Valerie called Ethan from her Manhattan apartment. How did it go? He asked. Better than I expected. The board approved an investigation. Gregory's on the defensive. That's good. How are you holding up? Valerie looked around her apartment. It was pristine, expensive, and utterly empty. I miss your couch, she admitted. Ethan laughed softly. It misses you too. Lily keeps asking when you're coming back. Tell her soon, Valerie said. I have to meet with the police tomorrow, then deal with the auditors. But after that, I'd like to visit, if that's okay. You're always welcome here, Ethan said. After they hung up, Valerie stood by the window looking out at the city. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she could breathe. But she also knew the real fight was just beginning. The investigation moved quickly. The independent auditors uncovered a trail of financial irregularities that all pointed back to Gregory Shaw. Offshore accounts, shell companies, falsified acquisition reports. Within a week, the evidence was overwhelming. The police arrested Gregory at his home. He maintained his innocence, claiming he was being framed, but his lawyers couldn't explain away the paper trail. The toxicology report on Richard Hart's body came back with definitive proof of arsenic poisoning administered over a period of several weeks. The prosecutor built a case showing that Gregory had access, motive, and opportunity. He'd been systematically embezzling funds, and when Richard started asking questions, Gregory had decided to eliminate him. With Richard gone and Valerie presumed unstable, Gregory would have had complete control of the company, but Valerie had survived, and she'd fought back. The trial dominated the news. Hart Industries stock initially plummeted, then surged as investors saw Valerie's strength and determination. She testified with clarity and composure, walking the jury through every document, every email, every moment that had led her to suspect Gregory. The defense tried to paint her as a grieving daughter, desperate to blame someone, but the evidence spoke for itself. The jury deliberated for 3 days. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts: murder, embezzlement, conspiracy. Gregory Shaw was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Valerie sat in the courtroom as the verdict was read, feeling her father's presence beside her. Justice had been served, but it didn't bring him back. After the trial, Valerie threw herself into rebuilding Hart Industries. She officially became CEO, and under her leadership, the company not only recovered, but thrived. She implemented new oversight measures, transparent financial reporting, and a corporate culture that valued integrity above profit. The board unanimously supported her. Clients returned. The stock reached record highs. But through it all, Valerie found herself thinking about a small house in Pennsylvania, about a little girl with a star pillow, about a man who'd given her his breakfast without asking for anything in return. 6 months after Gregory's conviction, Valerie stood in her corner office looking out at the Manhattan skyline. Margaret knocked and entered. "The quarterly reports are excellent. You've done an incredible job, Valerie." "Thank you," Valerie said, "but I've been thinking, I want to make some changes." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "What kind of changes?" "I want to step back from day-to-day operations, promote a strong management team, and shift to a chairman role." Margaret was stunned. "Valerie, you've just hit your stride. Why would you step back now?" Valerie smiled. "Because I've learned something these past 6 months. This company was my father's dream, and I'll always honor that. But it's not the only thing that matters. I've been so focused on winning, on proving myself, that I forgot how to live." "And you think stepping back will help you live?" Margaret asked gently. "I think balance will," Valerie said. "I want to be involved, but I also want time for other things, for people who matter." Margaret smiled knowingly. "Does this have anything to do with a certain mechanic in Pennsylvania?" Valerie laughed. "Maybe." "Then go," Margaret said. "You've earned it." That weekend, Valerie drove to Ethan's town. She pulled up to his house just as the sun was setting. Lily saw her first running out the front door. "Valerie, you came back." Valerie knelt down and hugged her. "I promised I would, didn't I?" Ethan stepped out onto the porch, wiping his hands on a rag. When he saw Valerie, he smiled. "Hey, stranger." "Hey yourself," Valerie said, standing. They looked at each other for a long moment, and Valerie felt something she hadn't felt in years: peace. "I thought maybe we could get breakfast tomorrow," Valerie said. "My treat this time." Ethan grinned. "I know just the place." The next morning, the three of them walked into the same fast food restaurant where it had all started. Valerie ordered 3 breakfast sandwiches and coffee. They sat in the same booth where she'd once sat alone, starving and terrified. Now she sat with Ethan and Lily, laughing as Lily told a story about her classmates. Ethan watched Valerie seeing the transformation. She was still the brilliant, driven woman who'd walked into that boardroom and taken down a killer. But she was also softer now, more present. "What are you thinking about?" Valerie asked, catching his gaze. "Just how far you've come," Ethan said. "We've come," Valerie corrected. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." Lily looked between them. "Are you going to stay this time, Valerie?" Valerie glanced at Ethan, then back at Lily. "Would you like that?" Lily nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, you can teach me more about computers, and Daddy can teach you how to fix cars, and we can be a family." Ethan's breath caught. Valerie reached across the table and took his hand. "I'd like that too," she said softly. Ethan squeezed her hand. "Then stay." And she did. Over the following months, Valerie split her time between New York and Pennsylvania. She'd spend 3 days a week in the city handling board meetings and strategic decisions. The rest of the week, she'd be in the small town, living in the guest room Ethan had offered, helping Lily with homework, learning how to cook simple meals, and discovering what it meant to be part of a family. Ethan had never expected to fall in love again. After Rebecca, he'd convinced himself that chapter of his life was closed. But Valerie was different. She didn't need him to save her. She was strong, capable, and independent. But she chose to be with him. That made all the difference. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching Lily chase fireflies, Valerie turned to him. "Do you ever regret leaving New York, giving up your career?" Ethan considered the question. "I used to. In the beginning, when things were hard and I was exhausted, I'd wonder if I'd made a mistake. But then Lily would do something that made me laugh, or she'd tell me she loved me, and I'd realize I hadn't given up anything. I'd gained everything that mattered." Valerie nodded. "I understand that now. For so long, I thought success meant the corner office and the stock price. But sitting here with you and Lily, I feel more successful than I ever did in that boardroom." "You don't have to choose one or the other," Ethan said. "You can have both. You're proving that." "Only because you showed me it was possible," Valerie said. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn purple and gold. Lily ran up to them, breathless and grinning. I caught 5 fireflies. Well, I didn't really catch them, but I counted them. Ethan laughed. That's pretty impressive, kiddo. Lily climbed onto the porch between them. Can Valerie read me a bedtime story tonight? Valerie looked at Ethan, who nodded. I'd be honored, Valerie said. As Lily dragged her inside, Ethan followed, feeling a sense of completeness he'd never thought he'd find again. Later that night, after Lily was asleep, Ethan and Valerie sat in the living room. Valerie pulled something from her bag. It was the napkin from the fast food restaurant, the one Ethan had used that rainy morning. She'd kept it all this time. Why did you help me that day? She asked. You didn't know me. You didn't know if I was dangerous or just crazy. But you gave me your food anyway. Ethan thought about it. Lily asked me once why people hurt each other. I told her it's because they're scared and don't know how to ask for help. When I saw you that morning, I didn't see a stranger. I saw someone who needed help. And I guess I just believed that if we all looked out for each other a little more, the world might be a better place. Valerie's eyes filled with tears. You saved my life, Ethan. Not just that morning, but every day since. You gave me a safe place to land when I had nowhere else to go. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You saved yourself, Ethan said. You had the courage to fight back, to stand up to the people who wanted to destroy you. I just gave you a place to rest before the battle. Valerie leaned her head on his shoulder. I love you. Ethan's heart swelled. I love you too. They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in the quiet comfort of knowing they'd found something real. Something worth holding on to. Months turned into a year. Valerie fully transitioned into the chairman role at Hart Industries, giving her more flexibility. She moved into Ethan's house permanently, and they talked about the future. Marriage, adoption, building a life together that honored both their pasts and their dreams. Lily thrived with Valerie in her life. She had a mother figure who encouraged her curiosity, taught her about technology and business, and showed her that women could be strong and kind at the same time. One Saturday morning, exactly a year after that rainy day in the fast food restaurant, the three of them returned to the same place. Valerie ordered the same breakfast sandwiches. They sat in the same booth. But everything was different now. Lily chattered about her upcoming science fair project. Ethan teased Valerie about her terrible attempts at making pancakes. Valerie laughed genuinely and freely in a way she never had before. As they finished eating, Lily looked at Valerie with a serious expression. Valerie, can I ask you something? Of course, sweetheart. Are you my mom now? The question hung in the air. Ethan held his breath. Valerie reached across the table and took Lily's small hand. I would be honored to be your mom if you want me to be. Lily's face lit up. I do. Can I call you Mom? Valerie's voice broke. I would love that. Lily jumped up and hugged her, and Ethan felt tears sting his eyes. This was his family. Built not from biology or obligation, but from choice, from kindness, from love. As they walked out of the restaurant, Ethan put his arm around Valerie. You okay? She nodded, wiping her eyes. More than okay, I'm home. And she was. Not in the penthouse overlooking Manhattan, not in the boardroom where she commanded $1 billion company, but here, in a small town in Pennsylvania, with a mechanic who'd given her his breakfast and a little girl who'd given her a star pillow. This was where she belonged. The three of them walked to the truck, Lily skipping ahead. The sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light over the parking lot. Valerie looked back at the restaurant one last time, remembering the terrified, broken woman who'd sat there a year ago. She was gone now. In her place was someone stronger. Someone loved, someone who'd learned that the greatest success wasn't measured in stock prices or corner offices, but in the quiet moments shared with the people who matter most. Ethan started the truck and they drove home together, ready for whatever came next, because they had each other, and that was more than enough.